Every day there is a forgetting, and every moment there is the possibility of remembering. Remembering who you truly are, awakening to your body, to the inner world and experience of being alive. Here is where you find the beauty, the joy. Here is where you free your soma. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Free Your Soma, Stories of Somatic Awakening and How to Live from the Inside Out. Today, I'm very honored to have Valerie Stanton here with me. She is an intuitive guide, an energy worker, and a gentle yoga teacher. I've actually hired her myself in the last year as my supportive guide to help me through some of the launches of my previous rounds of my program. And she's currently enrolled in the round of my program that started in March. So we're going to talk today about what led her to be interested, some of the fears and hesitations that she had to reach out to me in the first place and decide to, invest her time and energy into doing this program, as well as talk about some of the things that have arrived for her in her body, some of the things that have loosened up and changed and shifted, and also how she feels about it as a yoga teacher. So we're going to talk about some yoga stuff today and about some of the ways in which yoga is been showing up for her in her life in general, but then how it's shifting and evolving with the somatic work that she's now doing. So thank you so much, Valerie. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Amy. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes. So maybe for you can just orient our listeners to a little bit about what you do, how long you've been a yoga teacher, and sort of a little bit about like how you came to be out there on the internet doing this incredible work.
Absolutely. So I am an energy worker and I'm a Reiki master, and actually did my yoga teacher training at the same time as I was doing my energy working and Reiki training. And that was over 7 years ago, maybe 7.5, almost 8 years ago. And so I was training to do all of those things at the time. And I've been teaching yoga on and off for that amount of time because I had my kiddo and had a lot of different things come up. So, but I studied it back then, and I've been practicing energy work more regularly, I would say, throughout that time. And yeah, I love working with people one-on-one, and that's why I really gravitated towards energy work, I think. But I've been having a lot of fun over the past year, especially doing some group classes with people as well in my yoga.
Cool. Thank you. And, you were so wonderful at holding space for me and being my guide and helping me to create ceremony for myself in my life last year. It was really a gift to work with you. And so when you reached out, I was excited. I was like, wow, this wonderful human who like really knows how to hold space, like wants to work with me, wants me to hold space for them in their process. What a gift, what an honor to be able to do that for you. But you were really kind of frank with me about some of the like ways in which you felt vulnerable reaching out and initiating the conversation, right? Even though we already had this kind of relationship, there were some things that were kind of like in the way, and yet you had felt really called into my work based on, the things that I post and share about and write about. Can you tell us a little bit about your process and what it was like for you to reach out and start that conversation about joining Radiance?
Yeah. I mean, I knew it was all my own internal stuff, which made it eventually easier to do. And I knew as soon as I just said what I needed to say that it would be received really lovingly by you. And so I knew you well enough to just know how, what a wonderful person you are and how skilled you are, and also, what kind of loving space that you can hold as well. And so I just knew I needed some I needed some really big shifts in my life. And as I've mentioned to you, I needed them to be gentle. And it was kind of like I needed to sort of be coming home to myself again in this deeper way. And it felt pretty disorienting for me because of all of the tools that I have to kind of feel out of touch with myself in certain ways. And so yeah, I knew that I also needed kind of an extensive amount of support. There were things, doors I didn't want to open unless I knew that I had the support in place to hold that level of what might come up. And I knew from really hearing a lot about your program that it would be an extensive enough amount of support. Like, it wouldn't just be hanging there, like, open up the door, see what's inside, and then not have that level of holding to actually move through it. I knew that I would have what I needed to be supported through that in my body. So I really trusted that experience with you, and I'm so glad I did.
Yeah, I remember you saying that the first, like around the end of the first month, there, you were just so impressed with the format of the program, which I appreciated the feedback on because, I kind of just created this myself. I, didn't have like a specific model that I went for. I just created this format of like the one-on-one time and the group time. And I know that you just really enjoyed that first month. You felt like it went really deep. Would you say a little bit about what the first month was like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. It really did. I knew that you were going to have a lot of support in your program, but I honestly didn't know. And I don't know how I didn't realize it. I maybe it's just experiential, but you were doing so many and such extensive and so long of one-on-one sessions along with the group sessions. And I kind of told you that ended up being what I think helped me to drop in so deeply, was because it was being so personalized for what my body needed, that then I could take that into the group setting and understand what was going on. Um, and I don't think I have spoken to this part, but I actually think it kind of goes back to my childhood where I felt pretty disoriented in a lot of group learning settings where I'd kind of be like, I don't necessarily know if what's going on with me is what's going on with everybody else. And I would feel kind of lost in like group learning settings. So group work could be really intimidating to me sometimes. So the way that you broke that down and had all of that holding one-on-one made it so that it felt easy to drop in the group container. So in that first month, I experienced a lot of shifts in my body that now feel really just natural. My back pain that I had, which was really one of the main reasons that I had reached out to you. One of the ways that that kind of discomfort in my own body was showing up was in my lower back pain, and my lower back would just kind of, I didn't know when it might go out. Since having my son, who's now 5.5, I had that happen at least a few times, and it felt really scary to me. And so in that first month, I went from feeling that, which added a lot to the vulnerability that I came with, that vulnerability of like, wow, I don't know exactly how to be with my own body and trust my own body. And I went from having a lot of anxiety around that to feeling a lot more trust in my body and being able to be with myself, because I was no longer having that experience. I didn't have that constant feeling and pain anymore. And that was really huge for me.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that. And I also, you had some neck stuff going on too,
Hmm.
has shifted a lot as well.
Yeah, that felt very connected. Then my neck and back were always like these two kind of connected pieces. And it was such a part of my life. And I was so used to, no matter what I was doing these like really dramatic like neck rolls and stretches and like heart openers and all these like moves to kind of try to alleviate it. And it had just become like this loop that I was always in. Like, I mean, kind of constantly I would be moving my body in that way, but not experiencing the level of relief that I did after doing a month of the program.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I used to do all that same kind of stuff too. And then when the when the dis-ease is kind of softened, there's no need to, because there's not that kind of itch that you're trying to scratch,
Mm.
right? So then
Yeah.
you're not doing all this extra stuff to try to get at that thing, because the thing is just now integrated into your body again. That contraction or that pain or that discomfort is now just part of your body, instead of like this thing that's sticking out and causing irritation, right?
Absolutely. That's an amazing way of putting it. Yes. I can't improve on that.
Wonderful. Yeah. And so maybe you can share a little bit, the food piece was like another piece that you were called into here. And we spend about a month on that in the program, in the second month, right? But we still integrate it with the somatic movement. So there's kind of this discussion, and then you get to like process whatever has come up, like in your body or in your consciousness, through the somatic movement. How did you find that worked for you?
Yeah, I thought it worked really well. I felt, excuse me, really receptive to all of the information that you were sharing, and it felt resonant with me. So I'm not an example of somebody who experienced a lot of resistance to it. And I would also say that one of the main takeaways for me was around, when we do have moments of quote unquote imperfection in like maybe there's a discrepancy between like what we know and like what we're doing, or what we found ourselves, oops, like I just wandered into the pantry and I just ate something that maybe wasn't the most supportive choice ever. That there's still something that I can do to be present with my body, because I find like that when shame comes in, that's when you can't really be with yourself. And I think that was one of the pieces that I really wanted some support around um, in the program. Was I was just noticing that there were some different parts of myself that weren't able to really like hang out at the same time, because I had so much knowledge, but that's different from being in like a relaxed embodied state around that knowledge. You can either have it hyper alert you and make you more anxious because you feel like there's a big discrepancy, but when you're starting to integrate that, having a somatic tool of being able to drop into your body and kind of self-soothe in a way that's supportive to your nervous system is pretty paramount. I think it's huge.
Yes. And it can really calm that, like, that kind of like, oh crap, what just happened feeling of like, like, say, let's relate it to the back pain that you were experiencing. Like, you're feeling this uneasiness and this tension in your back, and you have this memory of like your back going out, and so there's this fear, right? The same way that, like, maybe, if you're someone like me and you've had like a history of like emotional eating and like my weight going up and down, or like having health crises, I go and I'm like eating that chocolate chip cookie and I catch myself in it, and I feel like, oh crap, like what's happening? Like, am I about to go overboard? Am I going to have like a health issue again? Am I going to gain 50 pounds?
Mm,
Like, we go into this catastrophic kind of thinking
yeah.
because we have some experience like in our body, in our history, that, really it's just it's our consciousness trying to alert us that, like you said, there's a discrepancy between like what the tools that you had, the knowledge that you have about how to help your body, and like what you're actually doing, like what you're actually
Yeah.
experiencing. And like, how do we bridge that gap and create more like harmony, or at least more ease, right?
Yeah.
Even when there isn't harmony, we can create a little more ease around that, and come back into like our experience. And like the word you use, self-soothe, is really great. Like, okay, here I am, and I'm like eating this bag of potato chips, and like, and my mind is starting to push me into like my shame and my fear and my guilt, like in this specific example. Like, can I just be with that, and then like feel into the sensations in my body, and ask myself, like, what do I need? Like, what's going to help me right now? Like that's one of the tools that I offer a lot in the second month of the program, is like asking ourselves, like, what do we need? You know, because often we're gravitating habitually towards like foods, you know, that are comforting, but it's not what you really need. Like maybe what you really need is like
Mm,
physical touch. Maybe what you really need
mm,
is like to say something to somebody, but you're like
mm.
pushing those words down with like another bite of food or something, right?
Yeah. 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 100%. Yeah. And I really like what you just said about harmony, because I think what it can feel like when you're um experiencing like the trying to stuff things down is that it actually feel like when you let yourself like, whoa, not just stuff it down, it can actually feel like really discordant, and that's freaky to your nervous system. So having anything that can like help you to be with what's feels that unsafe initially, like creating safety around what feels like I have to get out of here, I have to run, right? All those things that our nervous system might kick in to do, um, is creating this like larger container to hold whatever comes up. And
Yeah.
that's pretty big.
Yes, and that the
Yeah.
larger container can be literally like your body, and
Your body.
creating connection in your body to feel it all, and like be able to move with it instead
Yes.
of against it.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
literally what we're doing in the somatic movement. We're going with the contractions
Yeah.
rather than, you know, a lot of, and this is, you know, this will bring us right into month 3, into the yoga piece and stuff like that. But, you know, there's a lot of unintentional, I think, struggle that can be created in our bodies when we're going against ourselves instead
Mm.
of with ourselves. And there
Yeah.
can be fear in the beginning with this idea of going with ourselves, because we're like, well, what if I don't trust myself? Like, where am I going to take myself if I go with myself? Am I
Totally.
going to just be like binge eating? Am I just going to like go off the rails? Am I going to, you know what I mean? Like,
Mm,
we
yeah.
like these memories of like going with our, you know, experience as not being safe, right? But then when you start
Yeah.
to create that bigger container of your body to be able to hold whatever experience shows up, it becomes a little bit more safe.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm resonating with everything you're saying.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit, like, you know, you're as a yoga teacher and you had, you know, your own yoga practice. Was there anything about like, you know, what I share about somatics, or what you, oh, well, first, here's a good question. What did you know about somatics or somatic realms as a yoga teacher? Was that something you were aware of, or like, was it new to you? What did you know about this like concept of somatics?
Hmm. Yeah, I learned about it more independently from my yoga training, I guess I would say, like as a word and as a phrase. Um, and definitely didn't learn about it as specifically, like about Hannah somatic specifically, but just more this idea of just being embodied. And I've experienced it in like a variety of different ways, kind of like movement meditation, if you will. Yeah, that was, but not anything that was structured the way that Hannah somatics is.
Gotcha. Yeah. So it was kind of like this thing that you knew a little bit about, but like you didn't know maybe all the different differentiations of different kinds of somatic work out there, but you knew that it related to like your body and being really attentive and creating like awareness to become more embodied.
Yeah, yeah, and I definitely had like a little like sampler plate of different kinds of modalities in different work that I've done. Um, but I definitely had zero experience with Hannah somatics before working with you.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
one didn't come up.
It really is its own kind of thing, because it's this system that's fairly extensive, meaning that we can like apply it to any area of your body. And there's a very kind of like specific technology, or kind of like piece of your nervous system that we're using to create like a really specific result of like a
Yeah,
longer, less tight muscle, right?
yeah, Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I had not experienced something with that was that structured before, for sure.
Yeah. And then, you know, coming into it as a yoga teacher, did you have like any, like, did you have any expectations or hesitations? What did you kind of think of trying something different that wasn't like yoga, but was like another body practice? Like what did you feel called into with that? And what was like a little bit like edgy for you?
Yeah. Yeah, I felt both really drawn to it and also a little bit nervous because I had just started, not just, I had started within the past year I've been teaching yoga again, and I've shared this with you, but I really for a long time had a lot of hesitations over whether I wanted to teach or not because I felt like it was a lot of responsibility to hold in the way that yoga classes are structured with many people with very different bodies, with different injuries, you know, all of just there's the list goes on and on and on. And with the level of training that I had anatomically, and also just the fact that I don't tend to really think super anatomically, although I had yoga training in my yoga teacher training, I've always gravitated more towards the energetic side and more towards really, I guess, proprioception or like helping people drop into their own bodies more than anything. And so I was very called to your program the more that I saw how many yoga teachers had been doing it. You were sharing about some of their interests and their results doing it, and kind of this desire to sort of, I don't know if go beyond yoga is really the phrase that I desire, but it's kind of like there's there's more, right? Like that's not it. There's more tools to add in. And a lot of the way that you teach is what I have intuitively always felt drawn to. And um, so that part felt really exciting to me. I always want, you know, to teach slowly and to have people really connected to their bodies and have, like, if that was going to be the result at the end of the day, I was always less concerned about, you know, having somebody come away with the correct quote unquote posture. And it was always more about their internal experience. And I've shared with you that I was also a little bit hesitant because I was wondering, okay, well, how does this integrate with yoga? Can this integrate with yoga? Is it just going to blow my yoga practice up? Or like the calling myself a yoga teacher, can I still do that? All of these different questions that I had. You know, like what enticed me was also what made me nervous about delving into the world of beyond.
Yeah, yeah. And so what did you find? I mean, how did you feel like the style of somatic yoga that I teach, how did you feel like it was similar or different from how you teach yoga?
Yeah, it's well, technically it's different in that you go through the full description of what the pose is going to be before leading into that pose. I don't always go to that level of description, and I found that to be really interesting. Um, Especially as somebody who, before I was doing my training, I learned yoga by just being kind of thrown or jumping into a class where I was literally just looking around me, trying to figure out what people were doing. And it felt so chaotic to me that I was kind of just like going in these general, the closest shape I could get, right? And it took so long for me to have any understanding of what those postures really were and what I was doing in them. And of course, that refined through my own training and over time. But I felt that um, the way that you teach like slows things down even more. And as slow as my classes are, there has always been this curiosity for me around that because I think that there's always more room to personalize a class even more and to help people drop into their own experience even more, to start to limit the comparison even more, because it's such a paradigm switch from our culture. Um, it's just so big. I think people need a lot of space and a lot of permission to start reprogramming that.
Yes, reprogramming from what kind of like what kind of perceptions and attitudes about yoga that you feel like maybe we slip into that are related maybe to our culture?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, comparison and like looking around at people to figure out if you're doing it right. That was what my experience in classes were like early on. And again, luckily for me, not once I started studying it more extensively, but when I was first starting out learning yoga by going to drop-in classes, that was how I was learning, was by looking at other people around me, because the teacher was just like boom, 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 cueing things, moving on. And I was like, I don't know what you're doing. So, I mean, I think in that way, comparison became a central part of it. And looking around at other people to figure out if I was doing it right. And I think that's a massive part of our culture. We're taught to do that in so many different ways to, keep up. I think that's really one of the main things to reprogram as
Yeah,
part of our culture.
especially that, the phrase of doing it right.
Hmm.
Because if you're doing it right, then you could also be doing it wrong, right? And it
Hmm.
creates this kind of polarity of like, there's a right way to do this yoga pose and there's a wrong way to do this yoga pose. And I mean, I see this all the time. And frankly, to be completely honest, like I really used to believe that there were right and wrong ways to do yoga poses.
Yeah.
And I don't really think that anymore because I have a different perception of what bodies are doing. I see
Yeah.
bodies a little bit differently than I used to. So if I see someone who has quote unquote bad form in this yoga pose, I don't see I don't see like something that needs to be fixed. I see that this person has their nervous system is organizing their body in a particular way right now, right? And they could organize that differently in the next moment.
Mm-hmm.
Say
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
right, they could just organize it differently. They could
Yeah.
have, and to say that the pose is right or wrong, it leaves out what the person is experiencing internally, right? So for
Yes.
example, in the case of like you're doing it wrong if it hurts. Let's say we just use
Mm-hmm.
that. If you're hurting in the yoga pose, then you're doing it wrong. Well, sometimes hurt is this relative thing. What hurts to
Mm-hmm.
you could feel good to someone else or could feel like okay to someone else who has like a high pain tolerance, or you could be just very sensitive and it hurts a lot just to do small movements, right?
Yeah.
So, and you can't see hurt from the outside. You can't look at somebody's yoga pose and know what they're experiencing internally. You can't,
Yeah.
you can only ask them to inquire what they're feeling. Someone could be doing a yoga pose that looks wrong, looks like bad form. They don't feel any pain. They're having a great time.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Yeah.
hurt what they're doing because their brain is organizing it in this way that whatever they're doing is comfortable and feels natural to them. But you're looking at them and saying, oh, their hips need to be more forward, their spine needs to be more straight, they're collapsing through their lower back, right? All these.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, you could have someone like me who had this beautiful form, and yet I was experiencing pain, but I had such a high pain tolerance and I had such strong will and determination that you would
Mm-hmm.
never ever know that I was having pain.
Yeah.
I didn't even fully
Yeah.
register that I was in pain because
Totally.
my form was so beautiful in this pose.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so this idea that we can do it right or wrong and that there's, a right way and a wrong, I think it's limiting because something more, I guess, mysterious is going on. something,
Yes.
something more mysterious is going on. And so that's part of what I've been opening myself up to in my own practice, but also in the way that I'm offering the somatic yoga is like, how can we get more into that discovery and that process? And how can I like trust that if I give people space to have their own experience, that whatever shows up in their experience is going to be like safe, right? Not good or bad.
Yeah. 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 And I love that so much. Yeah, I really, really, really love that. That's something I just resonate with on on a really deep level. And I think like that in some ways, I think that is something that I like, that Hannah Somatics comes without a lot of the cultural ideas and baggage attached to it, because there are a lot of limitations that yoga can have just because of that. I remember teaching a class not even really that long ago, and like I was saying, like my classes are really slow. They're like, they're like in slow-mo and all these things, right? And I remember there was somebody who was there, and I was like, I was just like, but he must not be in a very comfortable, space, because his body just really didn't look like it. And I was kind of not trying to single him out, but I was also trying to really offer, like, let's, help you experience more ease and comfort in this position, or maybe not in this position. And he was really like not really quite able to receive that in that moment. And he was even like, but yeah, but like I'm stretching, and like that's what yoga is all about. And I was kind of like, ooh, oh no, like this idea of like he was already jumping to bypassing his body experience. And I was so trying to like meet him there and try to alleviate some of the discomfort I could tell was in his body. But he already had an idea of what the agenda should be from him coming to that class. And I was like, dang, that's when I was like, this is so big. How do I even have a yoga class without having some of these very almost meta conversations about like, what are we doing here? Why are we out here? Like there's a lot to kind of be redefined, I think, within our culture when it comes to this kind of stuff. There's a lot to be unpacked.
Yes, and yoga also has turned into, for me it was a career, it was my livelihood, and I had a lot invested in that, like when something is your livelihood, and I also was part of a culture of yoga that had a lot of really wonderful, beautiful, great things about it. And at the same time, there was like a kind of status quo of like, this is what yoga is. This is what a good class is like. Can you deliver that so that we can make money, so that we can keep it?
Yeah.
Are your classes filling up? Why or why not? And kind of that pressure to like perform and be a good yoga teacher, quote unquote, be like successful or be, someone that people want to learn from. And so we have a kind of like this ideal or model of what a yoga teacher is and what a yoga class is like that maybe we're not fitting into all the time.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's a huge part of it. And I know that, I think that yoga has shifted a lot from what I've just seen from when I started doing it. And maybe it's just that I started finding more pockets of it that I gravitated, and resonated with more. But I was starting to see really big shifts, and they were because, like I have mentioned, like that I had yoga teachers in my training who had, joint replacement surgery way earlier than they would have needed to because of ignoring their body and just putting themselves into some really extreme postures very regularly, or doing some of these. So it's like, that's how people started learning, and incorporating some, I don't know if you ever encountered much of her work, but luckily a lot of the teachers that I learned from were informed by Judith Lassiter's work, and she was a physical therapist as well. And so she started talking about some of these things, like there are some of these ways that maybe this is not right for everybody to move in, and like let's really break this down. So but to see how yoga kind of gained a lot of popularity, like fast vinyasa classes where you're just sweating a lot. And it's like almost like the opposite of really being with yourself. It's like this idea of just like pushing yourself so hard that you're not really feeling anything, versus slowing it down and creating gentle spaciousness. It's like two very different ways of approaching it.
Yes, yes. And I think that, part of where I'm at now in my process has been figuring out how to really marry these two things of the somatic work and the yoga, because I think that ultimately, the somatic work is about becoming connected to your internal experience in your physical body real time. That's what it's all, that's
Yes.
what it basically is. It's how
Yeah.
can I be connected moment by moment to my internal experience and just stay connected, even
Yeah.
if it's difficult, even if it hurts, even if it's not how I want it to be, right? And that kind
Yeah.
of creating that bigger connectedness within your body to hold all that space for yourself, right?
Yeah.
In your physical body. And that goes with everything. It goes literally with any experience
Does.
that you could possibly have, including running a marathon, including
Yeah.
weightlifting, including, whatever, some crazy, crazy experience, bungee jumping. It could go with anything, right? In the beginning, though, when you first become like aware of your internal experience real time, there's this like kind of unraveling of going like, oh wow, like look at
Mm,
all this stuff that was buried in these closets,
mm-hmm.
all of these things, and I'm sorting through all of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
part of what like I very, very gently invite you into in like a really like easeful way in the Radiance program. Like it's
Yeah.
not, we don't do like intense cathartic heavy lifting stuff. Like certainly some
Mm-hmm.
people have big moments, in their physical experience, but for the most part it's about letting go, and it's about
Mm-hmm.
letting things naturally process over a period of
Yeah.
time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But really, like,
Yeah.
where I'm starting to arrive at is like, this can go with anything, including an intense vinyasa class, but you're going to have a hard time with that intense vinyasa class if you're at the beginning of your somatic journey, because you're in this
Yes.
unraveling phase and you're starting to sort through and realize how disconnected you've been, and how maybe, like me, you may have been using intense physical experiences to separate yourself from your body.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
how can I be with those intense physical experiences while remaining connected to my body?
Yes.
Yes, that's not something that just happens one day and it's done. It's like an ongoing,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And it might look totally different. You might make some very different choices than you would otherwise. And that is part of I think, gaining trust in yourself, and why it makes sense to start it slower and smaller, because it's like you're learning how to like hold your own hand on that journey. And if you try to do that while you're like running, but you actually don't really trust yourself, it's not really an integrated experience. Like, you start slow. You're literally connecting with yourself. um and yeah, and so you don't know how things might shift. Yeah, I think it's totally possible that you can also do things where you're moving faster. I don't think that the somatic practice says you must only ever do things very slowly. But I think that once you are integrating that experience more, it can give you a foundation, to move from. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, a lot of times, and again, I'm speaking for myself with all of this because I've been on this this very kind of arduous at times journey with yoga, and I feel like I'm really
Hmm.
sort of healing my relationship to it, because
Yeah.
I wasn't super like healthy when I like in my approach to yoga. It was kind of compulsive in the beginning for me.
Yeah.
I came
Yeah.
into it fresh from like a traumatic experience, recovering
Yeah.
from like having been abusing substances as a teenager to deal with
Yeah.
depression and stuff like that. So for me, when I came into my yoga, I came into it in a certain level of desperation. And,
Mm.
sometimes we have an upregulation of our nervous system, right? Like that intense, fight or flight kind of like sympathetic nervous system experience. We have it
Hmm.
like deeply linked with like um dissociation. We have it
Yeah.
linked with exiting our experience, with getting out of our body. And so
Yeah.
unlink those two things and then be able to enter an elevated nervous system state, a sympathetic state, with actual body awareness, with actual presence in your body, like that's a task, like it takes time to unlink the dissociation and the upregulation of your nervous system. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying. I'm just like taking that in because I think that's so true. And I think a lot of peak experiences that people have can be like that for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Where it's like they're almost only able to have a peak experience because they're dissociating sometimes, and then it's like, oh my gosh, it's such a different experience to be, I mean, slowly integrating it. And I think that, that was another piece of why I was kind of resistant to it, is like, I knew that you weren't going to hand me just like some miracle solution. Like I knew from what you've shared about your own experience and like what it is that it really is because you're like weaving it into the fabric of your own life. Like you're normalizing having this be something that, is not just like, oh, you just did ayahuasca and now all your trauma's gone. Or like the way that people can just market things sometimes, I think can be so like we all want to believe that. And so I knew that it would be, I knew at times I was going to not want to do it. Or I'd be like, when I first did it, I was like, this is boring or whatever,
Yes.
And so I knew at times I was going to feel that way. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
but,
totally.
But, and it's true. There are still times I don't always want to do it. And that's just like my own resistance talking, because I know whenever I do bring in the movements, like it feels like very, like it feels like a sense of release, I guess, and a relief. I said release, but I meant maybe it's both relief in my body.
It is. And our bodies want it. Our bodies are like calling for it. And then our minds and our like, other layers of like ourselves are like, I don't want to, or like, I have some other thing I want to do, or I'm too busy, or there's all these things that come in. But once you like give it to your body, like once you actually like your body's just like, oh, thank you so much. It's kind of like, I think of it as like my little kid who doesn't want to go to bed or something, but is like so tired and starting to get cranky and starting to get overwhelmed by everything. And it's like, oh, let's just go to bed and it'll feel so good to rest. And like, I don't want to.
Yeah. Well, and I think like this part has been, honestly, this part, I'm glad I'm going to say this because I feel like this has been the part of my journey, really why I called you in, was because, I had my kid when I was 30 and he's 5.5. And I didn't anticipate some of the changes that would happen as a result of that. And I think I had this very not idealized relationship with my body, but I actually felt like pretty in control, quote unquote, of my body to a certain extent. Like I felt like, okay, by this point, I kind of know like what foods, like really bother me and which don't. I kind of felt like I had this understand or like almost like agreement, like with my body of like, okay, like I can do these yoga poses and I can be okay, or I can like know what to eat and I'll be okay. And I think that becoming a parent for me was such a big curveball, not only in the decrease in the amount of personal time that I had for myself, but also like when I started having this back pain show up or these things that were pretty unfamiliar to me. I know our stories are very different because you were living with like intense chronic pain. And I didn't really have that. Mine like started showing, my more intense experience with my body started showing up after, having my kiddo, and just like my whole relationship to my body really was changing. And I think that's when I was like, wait a second, I don't really know how to handle this. And this is when the things I used to go to could actually make it worse, when sometimes exercising would make it worse. Sometimes doing yoga would make my back feel worse, or more, I'd feel more out of control. And I think that lack of control was, and not really knowing like how to relate to myself in that way, it started causing more imbalances with my relationship with food and with eating. And like from there on, it's almost like the more of the lack of control that I felt, like the more that I was just trying to like regain it some way that felt safe, but I didn't feel like I had the way to do that. And that felt so it's so disorienting to me. And like, I mean, it was a bit of an ego, release for me to reach out to you to say, like, I don't feel like I should have to like have anybody help me with this, but like I am in some new terrain, and I'm finally admitting that to myself years down the line, that I need something different now. And I don't even remember why I started talking about that, but that to me really feels like the crux of what came up for me. And it's just like really relieving to have a new tool
Yeah.
to use to relate to my body in that way. And so even when I'm bored, I'm like, it's kind of a privileged problem to have, to like be bored. Like, instead of just being like, fuck, I'm so scared of like my body and I don't know what to do and all these things. It's like, I'm just kind of don't feel like doing that thing right now. It's like a great transition to have it go from.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's so wonderful. Thank you for sharing that about like just the way in which you felt that you had this sense of control, and then some things happened in your body. Like having a baby is a big deal in a woman's body, right? It's a big deal in your body. And then
Yeah.
everything shifted in so many other ways to accommodate this new way of living. And yeah, there can be plenty of instances where things shift and we feel like we lose a sense of control or connection in our bodies, whether it's injury or some kind of trauma or a life shift or some kind.
Yeah.
And that's, that's when we need as much support as we can get. And I'm so grateful that you like reached out and finally felt that there was someone that was able to help you. And what you've experienced now, since we're now ending the third month of the program, you have talked about feeling so good in your body, feeling so like flowing in your body. Certain activities that you were like afraid to do before, you're like comfortable and happy and joyfully doing now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you say a little bit about how things are like, after this third month of the program of doing this practice with me?
Yeah. 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 I feel really, I think it's that sense of being able to trust myself that gives me that sense of being able to be at home in my body. And that feels like such a relief. And yeah, I remember after that first month, or I don't remember when it exactly happened, but just being able to know that I could be in the garden and like be bent over in that position that was really aggravating to my back otherwise, that I could do that, and that I could just know that I was going to be okay. And even when we started the program and there were just certain arching movements with my back that gave me a lot of anxiety, and it's amazing to me now how I don't have that experience at all. So I just feel like this really, I mean, the phrase that we've used in a different context was softly embodied, and that just feels really safe and nurturing. And I mean, another piece, like, I just want to say for anybody who's listening too, is like, I really thought that I had to lose a lot of weight before I could feel that. Like, I really thought, I was kind of like, okay, like, I'm going to get some tools from this, but I was like, I'm not actually going to be able to be out of pain until I'm like 40 pounds lighter. And I have lost some weight, but I have not lost 40 pounds. And I thought a huge part of my brain, even coming in, was like, okay, Amy's going to help me with like this one thing, like so that I can exercise more, so that I can lose the weight, because I probably can't actually be out of pain until like I lose a significant amount of weight. And I'm still very open to that experience of like releasing some more weight. I'm not against that, but I'm also been actually kind of shocked that I could feel this good in my body while still, not having lost 40 pounds, probably lost like 8 pounds or something total. But that feels kind of wild to me. So that's been a huge game changer of being like, whoa, like I actually, like, as I am, I can experience a certain level of ease and comfort, and just feeling like kind of like leaned back in my energy, if that makes sense. Like kind of just like, oh yeah, like here I am. This is just who I am. And that's been really, really freeing. And I actually think that was a gift I didn't know that I needed, because I knew the whole time, because of my past experience with eating disorders and all of that stuff, I was like, I totally like know how to lose weight in a way that's disembodied. Like I know how to bully myself into it. Like I know how to like put my head down and like just do the right things. But I was like, I kind of actually don't know how to do it from a place that's like integrated, embodied, really compassionate. I haven't done that before. And so I have felt like a kind of a sense of relaxation around knowing that I can be comfortable exactly where I am, and that it's like a choice that I get to make, if that makes sense. Rather than something that like I needed to, that's the way that I wanted to do it. I was like, I don't want to bully myself. I don't want to feel like I have to sacrifice my integrity or any of those things, or like, but so that's been like kind of, that's been like literally shocking to me, which is cool to like reflect upon, that I could actually find some comfort in and sense of being at ease in my body. Like now I don't have to wait until I'm 40 pounds lighter. Whoa, that's huge.
Right. Well, and I would argue that being more at home in your body, feeling more comfortable doing and daily physical activities, and also just not having that same, like, I guess, level of discomfort in your body, is all of that's going to support whatever choices you make around weight loss. All of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, all of that's going to support it. And it doesn't have to be this like, I'm going to run my brains out and go on a crash diet and fast a bunch and like stress my body out to lose that weight,
Yeah.
that I'm a bad girl because I gained or something, right?
Right.
It doesn't have
Right.
to be that way, because now you have this experience of your body feeling good, and then you can also do whatever else you want. You could take up a running practice. You could make it a goal to lose another 15 pounds in a loving way, in feeling good
Yes.
in your body. You can feel
Yes.
your body
Yes.
doing that. You don't have to wait, like you just said, you don't have to wait to feel good in your body until after the weight is off or after this thing is done. You know?
Yes, 100%. And that's really like what I wanted and what I didn't, but like I didn't really know if that was possible. But I feel like there's a like a deeper invitation, to like continue the thread of like what helps me to feel really good, if that makes sense. So it's like it starts now, and then like you get to keep following it rather than being like, you can't have it until
Right.
like until this happens. And I know from so many, I know that finish line is like a false, it doesn't really exist. I know it doesn't really exist. It's just like you just kind of keep following like what feels really good to you. And so it feels so good to cultivate that. And then like it's more like an allowance of like continue to allowing more and more and more of that into my life, rather than like the opposite spectrum of just pushing really hard for it. So it
Yeah.
feels really good.
And it's great too, because I can really feel and see how our work intersects here, because a lot of what you support and teach around is like allowing ourselves to rest deeply
Yeah.
and get
Mm-hmm.
rest, and not having to earn our rest,
Yeah.
but that it's just like you said, just recently in like a session that I had with you, that the earth is supporting you. The earth is
Mm-hmm.
supporting you without any expectation. There's no,
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing you have to do to be supported, right? There's nothing that like you have to do to earn feeling good and safe in your body. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's what you're
Yeah.
allowed to experience by being in your body.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's so true. It's so true. I feel like, yeah, we both do a lot of gentle, like allowance, right? For all of that kind of deprogramming, if you will, to happen. Yeah, on different levels. So, oh yeah, our work definitely is very complementary.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being so vulnerable and sharing about your personal experience, with somatics and some of the things that you know, it's funny. I thought of this quote like right before we got on this call, and I'm like thinking about it in like a new way. So
Mm.
I think it's Shakespeare, and I mean, I'm just probably gonna like misquote it a little bit or something, but it's talking about the dream within a dream,
Mm.
right? And life is like this dream within a dream, you know? And I was thinking about that in terms of like this idea of like a somatic awakening or waking up, you know, or being, you know, woke is kind of like the really, you know, kind of over the top politicized term for it. But this idea that like the the waking up or the awakening never stops. There's just like layers.
Mm.
So like there's a dream within a
Yeah.
dream within a dream, and we're continuously, you know, waking up to a new day and a new experience and something like that we weren't aware of in ourselves before. It's like, you
Mm.
know, how deep does the rabbit hole go? Like it just keeps kind of going and going, and we keep learning and discovering, and there's always something more, right? And so even
Mm.
as like an energy worker, as an intuitive guide, as a healer, as a yoga teacher, like there was still another layer of like awakening that you were
Yeah.
being called into.
Yeah.
Actually
Yeah.
feel bad about. It's not like weren't you had failed or something, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's
Yes.
really beautiful and just part of this continuous process of being alive and being open to like the new possibilities that are available in, you know, in our lifetime.
Mm. Yes. I love that so much. And I think that just, yeah, reframes it from, yeah, being something that we get to be excited about. And that is what it's about here. Like if we did choose to come here, we chose to play the game of of like baseline, like, you know, kind of starting to want to go to sleep, but then also that desire, that little seed within us that's like what that desire to wake up too. And it's that really interesting contrast, I think, that we just keep playing with on on the earth game. And I don't know, I'm having fun, and it makes it even more fun to connect with somebody like you, or you just get to share your gifts, I get to share my gifts, we just all get to keep reminding each other, like your podcast tagline says, you know, it's all about that, just helping wake one another up.
Yes, yes, and start to live from the inside out, from our internal
Yeah.
experience, and dance with the internal experience and the external reality, and notice how they're constantly in this beautiful exchange, flowing with
Mm,
one another, you know, and that
yeah.
we're so blessed to be able to like witness that dance and interact and play with it.
Mm, mm-hmm. Here, here.
Awesome. Oh, well, it's been such a lovely conversation today. Thank you for getting into some of the yoga stuff and talking about these things that I think sometimes can be kind of taboo to talk about as a yoga teacher,
Mm,
like the yoga world, because like there definitely is like, I don't know, a way things are done. And then there's also
yeah.
like different ways that things are done, you know, different schools of
Yes.
thought. And you
Yes.
know, to kind of analyze and like talk about some of the challenges that, you know, like you've had as a yoga teacher, that you've had as a yoga student. I don't feel like everybody's always like ready to share about that stuff.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Honestly, my pleasure. I feel like we're all here in service to one another. And so if somebody can relate and it helps them to feel like they can explore, you know, more, then there we go.
Thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
beautiful. Okay, well, we'll catch up with you again sometime soon. I would love to have you share with our audience a little bit more deeply about your work. I know you're working on some new things right now, and maybe
Hmm.
there'll be a time in the future for you to share a little bit more on those exciting developments.
Yes, please. I'd love to come back. It'd be really fun.
Awesome. Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you, Amy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening to Free Your Soma. I hope you've enjoyed hearing from Valerie today about what's possible. If you're interested in creating easy flowing movement, effortlessly aligned posture, deep peace and safety within your body, a more aligned relationship to food, confidence to move painlessly through life, apply now for the Radiance program at www.freeyoursoma.com. As a podcast listener, you can get $500 off the summer round. The time is now. We start on July 15th. Cheering on your embodied freedom and discoveries. Bye for now.